start by introducing yourself?
My name's Carey Fuller, and I'm originally born and raised in Seattle.
Tell us how you got involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses.
It started with my mother when we used to live in the original Holly Park. There were witnesses who would go door to door there, and I remember that was my first memory of them. And my mother used to pack us up in her old yellow and white 57 Chevy and take us down to the local Kingdom Hall. And, you know, when you're about 5, 6, you're not really paying attention. We just kind of tagged along with her. My mother had a habit of never getting baptized, but always, like, she'd go to the meetings and stuff, and sisters would come over. And I think it was more of a social thing for her because she really didn't get what that organization is really about.
How long were you involved with Jehovah's Witnesses?
We kind of, in the beginning, up until I was about 9 or 10 years old, we were just kind of around it, but not in it. But then when we moved to Burien White Center area, it started becoming a little more serious. We had a sister that would come over all the time and do Bible studies with me and my younger sister. And then I started kind of taking an interest in it and started going every day. What was interesting about that was that it was almost like this lady was assigned to us. She was a good friend, but the interesting thing was the friendships are purely based on what the organization wants and what their agenda is. Outside of that, there wasn't much socializing or anything. It was always around the Jehovah's Witnesses belief system and their organizational goals. It was almost like they would go after you if they thought there's a possibility of you ending up getting baptized and being part of the organization. But the funny thing was all that attention and stuff kind of dies off after that, and so it's not surprising when people drop off.
So, explain to us how the Watchtower Bible Tract Society reacted to your struggles and you being economically disadvantaged.
That started when I was in my early 20s, long before I had kids. I was struggling. I used to be a full-time pioneer, and I was doing really busy in the organization's activities, but I started to notice a lot of hypocrisy and kind of double standards on how people got treated. I think when I was working 2 jobs and not getting a sleep, and the friends, as they call them, started noticing that I wasn't around, but they never took notice of the fact that the reason I wasn't around is because I didn't have any financial help or support. They would come by and ask why I wasn't going to the meetings, and then I remember one time to this one elder, I deliberately wrote out my schedule, handed it to him on a piece of paper after he said up on the podium, maybe you need help in your service to Jehovah if you just got your schedule in order. Well, I showed him my schedule. I had 2 jobs and I hardly got sleep. Sometimes I would go 3 days without sleep, yet they still expected more from me. And I remember the look on the elder's face when he saw what I wrote on that piece of paper, and he was stumped because, it never occurred to them that even though they were trying to encourage me spiritually according to their translation of the Bible, they never took into consideration the reality that a lot of us were living because we didn't get help from the society. They don't offer any financial help. There's no housing help. They're not qualified mental health counselors. In fact, the last day for me in my mind was when an elder told me, when I asked them why is it the organization doesn't provide financial help when they clearly have enough money to do so. He said, if a sister is really destitute, we don't give her money or anything, we just send her to welfare, which is a blatant display of not knowing how the welfare system works, because if he did, he would have never said that.
And as a religious organization, they're supposed to be offering charity and offering service to the community. But what out of anything that they've done did you see that was actually giving service to the community?
Well, their idea of giving service to the community is proselytizing, because I've just in my neighborhood, I never saw them helping people who were hungry or homeless. I never saw them go out of their way to actually even help the impoverished members of their own congregations. I mean, I knew several people, including a few of my relatives, who didn't get help from the society because they don't offer it, but they would go to other religious groups like Catholic Community Services and other community groups to get help with basic necessities. And I'm pretty sure there were conversations from those organizations, well, why doesn't this organization help their own members? Their members are coming to us. And so that was like a red flag number one with me, and started making me question a lot of stuff that the organization does. And it didn't take long before I started really digging into their history and the history of their members, especially Mr. Charles Taze Russell. To me, he was a kook and he was a racist. And I thought, why am I in this organization? They're a doomsday cult. None of their predictions from the past ever came true. And then when you dig up all this stuff that's actually factual, including lawsuits against them, there was always this deflection away from being held accountable. But they just wanted you to go on blindly believing. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty much done. I didn't formally write any letters of disassociation or anything because I don't feel I owe them that, since they did absolutely nothing to save a lot of us from the childhood hells we're being raised in. They turned a blind eye to child abuse. I saw that and experienced it for myself. And just this weird apathetic attitude they have towards doing anything real for community members versus blindly following an organization that doesn't really care that much about them unless it's to serve their interest, which is really iffy anyway, because if you were to go look up a lot of stuff and scandals they've been involved in, it wouldn't take long for you to figure out that this is not a godly organization, it's a man-made one.
So is anybody, any of your relatives or anyone you know still in the organization?
Loosely. I have one or two relatives that are loosely, but I think they see through the hypocrisy and they just kind of walk away quietly. But outside of that, I don't think I do. Not anymore.
Did the shunning policies ever affect you in any way, shape, or form?
It did when I had friends that walked away because the organization is homophobic. And I remember thinking, why are you demonizing these people? They didn't really do anything wrong. And I would talk to my friends. I remember one big red flag when I was younger is when they tried to silence Brother Franz, who used to be part of the governing body. And I remember they were trying to tell us, oh, don't listen. And I remember when protesters showed up at one of the conventions, which I remember there were a bunch of EXJWs outside holding picket signs and things. And I remember being told, oh, don't talk to them. And I thought, well, they're not really doing anything wrong. And I remember they were making public announcements at the convention that Brother Franz was going to make this announcement, and he had written his book. Well, I already suspected that Brother Franz was actually telling the truth. So I went ahead and listened to his interviews, and I looked at his book, and it dawned on me he was right. A lot of stuff, the higher you climb, the more dirt you're going to see. And it's because this is a human organization. Most of the leadership is not qualified psychotherapists, and it shows.
What was your experiences like with elders?
Most of the time it wasn't too bad because they were people I knew from the neighborhood, but they were always at a distance. The funny thing about that is the elders who were black or people of color like me, I got along with them better than I did with the white ones. And the reason for that is because they were the ones who told me that a lot of the white elders and the white members were completely clueless about the reality our communities have to deal with every day. And we noticed there is a double standard of treatment the higher up the ranks you go. Because if you notice, take a good look at what color the governing body is and has been for several years. And then even, back then, if we said the word white privilege, they would not understand what we were talking about. They wouldn't understand that there is two Americas, one that we live in and the one that they have always lived in. And it's like most of the time my issues were stupid things that came out of other members' mouth that I began to question, well, if you're really God's people, how come you're ignorant? And why are you racially and culturally so ignorant? Because I remember there was a senior sister one time, we were in a car going out in field service, and she knew I was in the back seat and blatantly said, I was the only person of color in the car, blatantly said she didn't think God intended for races to mix. And then my counter at 15 years old was, well, if that was true, why is it our genetics can intermix with each other? We shouldn't be able to breed if that were true. I think what you're really doing is thinking you can pass your racism off and that I'm not going to question it just because I'm younger than you. Well, her face turned red and all of a sudden she shut up. And then every day after that, I was treated differently because I spoke up about, things that came out of their mouth that were really clueless about just how ingrained their implicit biases were. In fact, a lot of people of color kept leaving the congregations because they didn't get it. They didn't understand that, yeah, you are cold and you are racist and you think you aren't, but we're telling you to your face that on this occasion you did this and said this and this is the attitude you have. Why should we even be here? We can go make our own halls in our own communities and get treated better than this. That turned out to be false also because, again, as I was growing up, I always kept track mentally of all the hypocrisies and double standards and outright lies and gaslighting that went on, because eventually, by the time I got into my early 20s, I knew it was time to go. I wasn't coming back.